All right, talk to me. You're this weekend in the NBA is what, bro? What is
Quin
it?
Snyder.
Oh, got it.
Potentially going to the Hawks. I'm actually curious. I want to hear John's response on this because I know you're a big DeJounte hater, and you've been very, very adamant in the past. I remember of the Jazz defense, and I remember me and you. We had a show one day. We were talking about how broken the Jazz were defensively. So talk to me. What can Quin Snyder provide for the Hawks? How can he make a quick fix this year to maybe they can go into the playoffs, upset not the top dogs, but maybe one of them other teams?
This year, no. It would be more of an evaluation for the offseason. I think Quin Snyder is amazing because top 10 offense, top 10 defense, year in, year out in Utah. Atlanta should be that in theory. They haven't been. And with how bad the offense looked, it was constant hero ball. Your turn, my turn. Snyder's not doing that. Snyder's innovative. He's got, the hair. It speaks. He's a really smart guy. He's crazy in terms of preparing. I think DeJounte will be maximized. And with a real head coach, Trae Young would have one of his best seasons.
And do you think he has the
Crying
personnel?
at the hair
because
analogy.
In Utah, he didn't have the personnel. We can all agree he didn't really have the personnel. You think this Atlanta Hawks team is the personnel for him?
I think they're a couple pieces away. And Yucca, maybe he can develop into that versatile Swiss Army knife, but I do think they need a better starting center than Conway. If they can get...
What's wrong with Clint Capella?
He's slow. He's also...
He's an overrated defender.
Just an old school.
But his shot blocking is still very good.
It's... If it were very good,
he's
they
a good
want to be
rebounder.
first in defensive
really good
rating.
rebounder.
He is a good rebounder.
Great rebounder, you're right.
No, yeah, incredible rebounder.
Yeah,
Say
big
that.
time. It's just...
Can he unlock DeAndre Hunter?
That
That's
was
an amazing
actually the
question.
real question.
Because he's never had a listen. Credit to Royce O'Neal, but
Can he
let's
unlock
be
DeAndre
fucking
Hunter's
serious.
hilarious.
He's
he went
never
for a
had
first. Respect him.
Nets clowns. He's never had a great wing defender like DeAndre Hunter. I think we all can agree when DeAndre Hunter plays, he's on his shit. He's a great wing defender, can space the floor, can create in spurts for himself. So can he be? Because Quin Snyder, I agree. I think he's a great hire. He got slighted in Utah. I always thought he was a great coach. He got slighted in Utah because they didn't have the personnel. They didn't have a backup center. They didn't have wing depth. They didn't have great wing defenders. So he didn't have the personnel to truly fix. And plus, Rudy Gobert was getting paid $40 million. You have to play him. You know what I'm saying? So, but I think in Atlanta, being able to maximize DeJounte, being able to provide more offensive spacing, pace and flow, moving the ball a lot. But unlocking DeAndre Hunter, I think, is the key because that's the guy who's their wing defender, the guy who kind of puts all the pieces together because now you have Trae, you have DeJounte, the guard stopper, and then now you have a wing stopper in DeAndre Hunter. So
They took Hunter in the top 5 to become that years ago. Now, the front office has changed since then, but I think the answer is yes. Quin Snyder would maximize Hunter because, from Joe Ingles to Boyan to Royce O'Neal, those Utah teams maximize their personnel. And with Hunter, what he's always lacked is that large enough offensive role and the health. The durability component, we don't know. Yeah. But I do know with the coaching, Snyder was in the regular season elite. In the postseason, there's some questions about, his
lineups.
His teams emotionally were combustible, and he wasn't really, I don't know what the right wordage would be here.
Combustible is a good word.
They weren't emotionally intact by the end of the 10 year. And I feel like Snyder didn't really tap into that well enough. But in terms
they
of
were just worn out by him.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe he was worn out by them. You saw his faces every year.
Oh yeah, man.
He went from being energetic and constantly talking it out. It's like, all right, when's this going to end? But in the postseason, the real question is for an Atlanta team that has a clear ceiling with Trae Young, you now bring in a coach in Quin Snyder who was always like Mike Budenholzer, a phenomenal regular season coach with great schemes, but he never had that, foresight long term to the playoffs where he had different lineups, different optionality to toggle between. Those Jazz teams only had one way, one approach, and when that didn't work, they fell apart. And he got out-coached in multiple different series because they didn't have, like I said before, there's different looks they can go to when something didn't work.
Now, does this potential hiring, I should say, does it change your opinion or outlook on Trae Young?
No.
No.
Just on Trae Young, no.
I think, so remember Mike Conley? He was very playmaking centric. He's always been a good playmaker, but he was very not look for a shot, help others, get them into it. I think he can provide that for Trae Young, but I don't think anybody can help Trae Young. And I say this because
other than him?
No, I say this because
himself.
Yeah, because no coach can truly
give him 5 inches and 60 pounds.
Yeah, no coach.
You don't need the height to be a better teammate.
Okay, but that's within yourself. That's what I'm saying. No coach can teach that.
I'm with you there. In terms of leadership, in terms of intangibles, that's all within you.
Yes.
And Trae Young, from what it seems up until this point, has lacked that. Reasons why he's had difficulty with the different head coaches that he's had. Why this becomes a little bit more interesting, or why it's harder to gauge, and the thing that most intrigues me about this is the relationship between Trae Young and Quin Snyder, because you mentioned it. When Quin was over there in Utah, there was a disconnect between the two best players because of their own issues, not because of the coach. That wasn't on Quin. Where Donovan and Rudy had their issues because of the whole situation that happened prior to the shutdown. Yeah. And it feels like there was a lack of trust there, at least from what the reports had come out with. Now, similarly, where at least Quin has dealt with stars before, but not quite like Trae, where
in terms of ego?
Correct.
Okay.
In terms of ego, and also with the fact that Trae Young, his ego, yes, sometimes gets in his way, but at the same time, his talent's so undeniable that it's going to be if I'm Quin Snyder, my primary focus is, yes, you want to develop DeAndre Hunter. Yes, you want to maximize the ceiling of these players, but you cannot maximize the ceiling of the Atlanta Hawks without getting to Trae Young. Whoever that head coach is that changes Trae Young is going to be the one that continues to stay with the Atlanta Hawks for the remainder, at least for Trae Young's tenure. Because the importance of the Atlanta Hawks is to not come away with the idea of, man, we could have Luka Doncic. Man, we traded Luka Doncic to acquire this guy who is our franchise guy. And I think we had conversations off the podcast saying that people like to say, I think this was on the playback actually, now that I think about it, people like to have the conversation of, is this the most even trade in NBA history? No. It was actually a fleecing by the Dallas Mavericks because they got Luka Doncic. And I'm sure the Dallas Mavericks, if they had Trae Young, although Trae Young is a very good player in his own right, he's simply not Luka Doncic. No. So with that alone, you need to do whatever you can if you're the Atlanta Hawks to put Trae Young in the best position possible. But yes, I believe Trae Young does need to look in the mirror. I think Trae Young needs to become a better leader himself. But what's undeniable is his talent on the basketball court. And he has been cooking recently, where he started horrendously on a bad stretch. I think it was early in the season, 42% from the field, 31% from three. He's increased it to, I believe, 40 in a certain span of games. I think it was 46 and 35% from the field. With the volume that he's at, that is still impressive to me. His playmaking is still impressive to me. I just think that Quin's main focus, where it should be, yes, the development of a DeAndre Hunter, the development of these young players on the Atlanta Hawks, incorporating these lineups where DeJounte and Trae
can work together,
and DeAndre, yes, can work together. His primary focus needs to be Trae Young because Trae Young is the most important piece to this team.
Well said.
Devin Booker said a crazy bucket over Drew Holiday type of game. I think this is a great move. It wasn't crazy, actually. It was just post move, little fade over his right shoulder. But I like this move for the Hawks. I think this season is a wash. I don't think Quin Snyder is going to come in. And even if they make the play-in, I mean, they're going to be a first-round exit. They'll play Milwaukee or Boston round one, and it's going to be chopped. Doesn't really matter who your coach is. But the Hawks, I think we all agree, are a talented team. They have talented players. Trae Young, DeJounte Murray. We mentioned DeAndre Hunter, former top 5 pick. But they almost felt like they had no direction in a sense, and not in like a talentless, like they're not like the Wizards where like they're trying to compete, right? But it was just always, it felt like no one took accountability. And going back to Drew's point of like not having someone like Trae Young who is the leader of your team because he's the best player on your team, but not having that personality of being a leader. And I think that's where Quin Snyder could come in and bring some more experience and overall just have someone to kind of put this team back together, right? I mean, 2 years ago you go to the ECF, right? And it almost seems like the arrow's pointing up for the Hawks. Then last year you get bounced in the first round. Then this offseason you trade, 3 first-round picks, get DeJounte Murray. And then in the middle of the season, or I guess to start the season, things don't go well. The fit doesn't seem to be right. You're losing games. Trae Young struggles. DeJounte Murray kind of finds his way as the season goes on. But then you have the Trae Young and Nate McMillan drama that goes on throughout the season. McMillan gets fired, and through all of these ups and downs, there was really nobody there to kind of take accountability or at least like push this team towards one direction and kind of figure out what their flaws are, figure out what needs to be fixed. And I don't want to make that as a shot to Nate McMillan because Riv went on a nice tangent last episode about how terrible Nate McMillan was.
Garbage.
But I do think Quin Snyder could come in here and at least bring some sort of leadership type accountability qualities that this team needs. They feel immature at times. Maybe that is because it's Trae Young being their best player and we're expecting him to be the leader when maybe that's just not his personality. That's just how it is for some guys. But I think Quin Snyder, it would definitely be the best hire. I mean, he's the best outside of Ime, who, obviously comes with his own troubles. He's probably the best head coach available out in the market. And the fact that the Hawks, who, listen, give ownership credit, they didn't want to go over the luxury tax to pay Kevin Huerter. They're going out. Quin Snyder would be I think Woj reported $8 million a year. That'd be one of the more higher paid coaches. So shout out to ownership to at least put the best possible head coach in this position. And it gives him a bit of a head start, too. He could be with these guys, be with them every day going into the offseason. Yeah, so at least he doesn't go into the offseason kind of blind and trying to figure things out on the fly. Now he gets a month or two if he ends up getting hired, figures it out. And, next year puts his own kind of spin on it in the offseason.